If you're quietly noticing these 5 shifts, you're already in the middle of a profound inner transformation. Take a full breath. Let it out. Completely. For just a moment, be still. What I'm about to share doesn't announce itself with thunder. It doesn't need to. It emerges as the light does at morning's edge. So gradually, you don't see the change until you're already surrounded by it. When your soul starts expanding, it doesn't come with a crash. It unfolds in the background of your most ordinary moments. You catch yourself thinking a thought, then pausing, realizing it belongs to a version of you that's fading away. The instincts you operated on for years now feel strangely off. Like a well-worn coat that suddenly doesn't sit right on your shoulders. And this feeling, this slight unease, it's not a mistake. It's the first whisper of a great change. You begin to observe your own mind with a new kind of quietness, not with criticism, but with curiosity. You see the worries you used to carry as part of your core identity, and now you can gently set them down. You react to old triggers in new ways, not by effort, but because the old way simply feels foreign. You start to understand the person you were wasn't wrong. That version was built for survival. From the wisdom you had at the time, now you have more. You sense more deeply. You've journeyed far enough to recognize what disrupts your peace. And that quiet knowing, you sense that conversations you once sought now drain you. People who felt like home now feel distant. Not because of any conflict, but because your inner world is moving to a new rhythm. And not every rhythm can synchronize. You release the need to be validated by everyone. You trade noise for a deeper kind of quiet. You lose the urge to justify your path and the habit of trading your own calm for another's convenience. And as these old skins shed, your entire energy field recalibrates. You become less drawn to chaos, to performance, to the endless hunt for outside approval. Your mental space starts to clear, letting go of clutter it once thought it needed. Even your dreams evolve. What you once chased with all your heart now barely holds your interest. This can be disorienting. How can a goal that once defined you now feel so empty? But that is evolution. It rewrites your inner compass without a formal announcement. You begin to desire things that truly sustain you, not just excite you. You start to value serenity over applause, alignment over accolades, realness over reception. You see that the old you was sculpted largely by the world outside. The team seeing emerging you is being shaped by the universe within. As you evolve beyond your former self, waves of grief may surface. It is natural to feel tender toward the you who didn't know better, who tried so hard, who held heavy burdens in silence, who wore armor because true vulnerability felt too raw. You grow beyond your history, but you honor it, for it brought you here. Growth doesn't delete your past. It weaves it into a richer, more complete tapestry of self. And then, almost imperceptibly, something fundamental turns. You find yourself standing in a clearer state of being, one where you don't snap from reflex, don't grasp from scarcity, don't make yourself smaller to put others at ease. You occupy space differently. You decide from a new center. You perceive with fresh eyes. You experience emotion with a new depth, and though the revolution is silent, it is total. Your essence begins to rise above the old borders of identity, making room for a self that feels more authentic, more anchored, more complete. You begin to feel a deep, almost magnetic draw toward alone time, a pull that's hard to articulate to others. It isn't isolation, it isn't hiding. It is a gentle summons from within, a soft murmur asking you to retreat from the clamor, from demands, from the weight of constant engagement. You start to notice that environments you once found stimulating now feel abrasive, and the time you spend in your own company begins to restore you in ways you'd forgotten were possible. Solitude becomes less an avoidance and more a homecoming, a return to your core, to your breath, to the quiet that exists beneath every feeling. There are times you'll find yourself sitting in stillness without planning. 2. You'll stop in the middle of your day, not from fatigue, but because your spirit needs a moment just to be. You start longing for plain silence, dawn before the day begins, twilight as the world softens, an afternoon where you step back simply to be present with your own interior landscape. These pockets of solitude start to feel like sanctuary. They start to feel like clarity. You start to realize that in solitude, you hear the parts of your soul that were always speaking, but were drowned out by duty, by noise, by the pressure to seem productive or unbreakable. In solitude, you discover your thoughts have a different quality. They aren't frantic or fragmented. They settle. They unfold. They reveal layers you hadn't noticed. You begin to see your own emotional blueprints, why you flare up a certain way, what tender spots still ache, which memories still have a hold. Solitude grants you the space to know yourself without an audience. It gives you permission to feel without a filter, to reflect without a timer, to simply exist without a role. You might notice you no longer feel compelled to fill every second. You stop grabbing for distractions on instinct. The itch to constantly check, constantly plan, constantly interact begins to fade. You discover substance in quietude, in deliberate pauses, in moments where the external world is still, but your internal world is profoundly active. You begin to understand that solitude isn't a void, it is an expanse. It is where insight can bloom. It is where your inner knowing amplifies and your own voice becomes easier to follow. With solitude, your relationship with you transforms. You listen to yourself with more kindness. You become more truthful. With your own heart, you begin to discern what depletes you and what truly refuels you. You become conscious of how much vitality you once gave away without a second thought. Solitude shows you that your own presence is precious, not just to others, but to you. You start to enjoy your own companionship in an entirely new way. You realize you can sit with yourself and feel contentment, not agitation. Calm, not boredom. Sometimes solitude brings to light truths you've been postponing. It shows you emotions you shelved, aspirations you sidelined, sorrow you didn't have space to process. But instead of crushing you, these revelations feel like an opening to mend. You begin to see that solitude isn't a retreat from reality. It's a rendezvous with your truth, where you reconnect with what is essential, where you lay the groundwork for the person you are destined to become. Through this growing appetite for solitude, you realize the universe inside you is as vast, as vibrant, as vital as the one outside. And as you dwell more in that inner realm, you gather a strength you didn't know you possessed. You gain a lucidity that feels like it originates beyond the thinking mind. And softly, without strain, you begin to observe a change from the inside in how you answer situations that used to trigger immediate knee-jerk responses. Where once you'd act from impulse, you now create a space. That space is tiny, quiet, likely unseen by anyone else. Yet, it contains the gravity of a deep inner shift. You start catching yourself before uttering words that aren't true to you, before falling into routines that depleted you, before entering emotional cycles that once seemed inescapable. This new consciousness doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives like a quiet nudge, a gentle reminder that you have agency, an option you weren't aware of before. What once felt like a core trait begins to feel like just a conditioned loop. You see that many of your reactions weren't expressions of your true nature. but echoes of old fears, old hurts, old stories you've carried too long. You start to notice how often you were operating from a place of self-protection, from a need to win, from an ancient soreness you never had the stillness to truly heal. And now, instead of blindly following those old programs, you examine them. You regard them with honesty, without self-blame. You begin to see them as strategies your psyche created to guard you, not as mandates you must obey forever. There is a profound strength in realizing you can disrupt your own conditioning. Something within you fortifies each time you select a different path. You start declining, where you once acquiesced out of obligation. You start speaking with care where you once retorted with edge. You begin to walk away from friction you would have once walked into. Even your inner monologue begins to change. Thoughts that once snowballed into worry now meet a different kind of attention, an attention that inquires, redirects, and soothes. This transition feels like acquiring a new dialect, the language of your awakened self, the part of you that is finally stirring. There are instances when this metamorphosis
You catch yourself
feels
behaving
strange.
differently
and wonder, is this still me? And the answer is yes. It is the truer you, the one that was always there beneath the static. Releasing old patterns doesn't erase your identity. It reveals who you were before conditioning shaped your choices. You start to recognize moments where you would have acted from autopilot, and you feel a glimmer of quiet pride. You feel yourself becoming someone less, governed by yesterday, and more in harmony with now. This awareness also introduces a new sensitivity. You begin to detect the emotional undertow of circumstances more acutely. You intuit when someone's words are flowing from their own unhealed place, rather than from a clear center. You sense when your own feelings are rising, not because of the present moment, but because an old wound has been grazed. Instead of letting these moments pull you into familiar whirlpools, you breathe. You give yourself room. You begin to reply from understanding instead of fear, from discernment instead of raw impulse. The most empowering part of shifting patterns is the instant. You know, you are not obligated to be the person you were last week. You don't have to perpetuate narratives that harm you. You don't have to repeat reactions that steal your serenity. You recognize that change doesn't demand struggle. It asks for awareness. With every pattern you dissolve, a new neural pathway forms, one that guides you toward a life crafted by purpose, not by habit. This internal recalibration becomes a silent revolution. 1. Others might not notice immediately, but you feel in your bones. You start trusting yourself more because you witness daily evidence that you can choose anew. You begin to live with more presence, more lucidity, and more emotional sovereignty. Without even trying, you step into a renewed version of yourself, one not chained to the past, but led by a growing inner wisdom. You begin to feel empathy expanding in a way that goes beyond mere politeness or surface-level sympathy. And it isn't an act. It rises organically, subtly, often when you least expect it. You start noticing a tenderness growing within, even in situations where you would have once met with frustration or critique. It's not that you become passive. In truth, you become more resilient because you finally grasp that true empathy isn't about permitting poor treatment, but about seeing the human behind the action, the hurt beneath the outburst, the history beneath the surface. Where you once jumped to assumptions, you now hold a pause. You perceive people differently. Their anger doesn't alarm you. Their detachment doesn't perplex you. Their reserve doesn't offend you. You start realizing everyone is fighting private wars, battles they seldom voice. You see it in a fleeting expression, in a tone of voice, in a hesitation before they speak. This recognition makes you more compassionate, more grounded, more patient. Not because you excuse harmful behavior, but because you understand that pain often articulates itself in clumsy, messy ways. This compassion circles back to you as well. You begin to regard your younger self with grace instead of regret. You see the choices you made and understand they weren't errors. They were efforts to cope, efforts to connect, efforts to find your way in a reality you hadn't yet learned to navigate. You cease addressing yourself with harshness. You stop penalizing yourself for your humanity. Instead, you offer yourself the same forbearance you extend to others. You allow yourself to experience what you feel without guilt. You start to forgive yourself for what you couldn't have known then. You notice your heart opening in small, significant ways. You might find yourself deeply touched by scenes that once passed you by. The gentleness in an elder's eyes, the patience of a stranger, the weariness behind a friend's smile. These subtle moments start to resonate because empathy heightens your perception. It tunes you into the fragile, beautiful experiences of others. It helps you grasp that everyone holds a narrative, and every narrative has its vulnerable chapters. This comprehension alters how you navigate your days. Your dialogues transform. Where you might have once given advice, now you offer a listening presence. Where you might have tried to solve someone's problem, now you hear them without needing to control the result. You understand that sometimes people don't need answers. They need to feel genuinely witnessed. Empathy is the soul seeing itself in another. Empathy teaches you to hold emotional space, not apply emotional pressure. It teaches you to let others unfold at their own pace, without hurrying them or molding their journey to your expectations. You also become more aware of your own limits. Before, you may have mistaken empathy for self-sacrifice, but now the feeling is sharper, wiser. You understand that safeguarding your peace is also an act of profound compassion, because harming yourself to aid others only generates more suffering in time. You begin to say no with grace. You withdraw from scenarios that consume your light. You create distance from relationships that siphon your emotional reserves. Empathy doesn't make you endure more. It guides you to choose with greater intention. This deepening empathy reshapes your inner landscape. You feel less need to counter, less impulse to criticize, less desire to debate. Your heart feels expansive, not burdened. You start wishing well for those who have caused you pain, not because you want them back in your life, but because you no longer wish to harbor bitterness within your own spirit. You begin to see that empathy is not a transaction. It is a state of awareness. It is one spirit recognizing its own essence in another, even when that other person has lost sight of who they are. Through this growing capacity for empathy, your entire emotional being transforms. You move with more understanding, more attentiveness, and a gentler, steadier strength. You start perceiving life through a lens that makes all of it feel interconnected, more purposeful, more profoundly human. You begin to detect an internal tug toward authenticity that you can no longer dismiss, even when it unsettles your comfort zone. It starts softly, as a low, persistent hum in your center, a murmur that something in your life or your belief system is out of sync. Initially, you might attempt to mute it, to rationalize it away, convincing yourself that some truths are too challenging to confront, that certain realities are simpler left in shadow. But the tug intensifies, grows more undeniable, because your higher self knows that evolution is impossible without integrity. It knows that metamorphosis demands facing what you've kept from your own awareness, whether knowingly or not. You start scrutinizing your path more thoroughly. You notice the decisions you've been making, the motives behind them, and the ways you may have been misleading yourself to feel secure or accepted. You realize some of your convictions were inherited. Some of your routines were formed by apprehension, and some of your feelings were buried because feeling them was daunting. This process can feel unsettling, even scary, because the mind instinctively clings to the familiar, especially when change threatens established patterns. Yet despite the unease, you find that truth brings a profound sense of freedom. The more candid you are with yourself, the lighter you become, as if a burden you weren't fully conscious of is beginning to dissolve. You notice that this allegiance to truth alters how you connect with others. Falsehoods, omissions, and facades begin to feel insubstantial. You cease accepting dishonesty in your dealings, not from a place of superiority, but from a need for congruence. You start seeking transparency in your relationships, your exchanges, your bonds. You are pulled toward genuineness with an almost gravitational force. Individuals who are not aligned with sincerity, whether they are hiding from themselves or from you, naturally drift to the periphery. This isn't a deliberate decision, but a natural outcome of your inner realignment. Your soul is no longer willing to invest its light in illusions. The quest for truth also invites self-reflection that is bare and direct. You begin confronting your own shadow aspects, the anxieties you've neglected, the patterns you clutch, the parts of yourself you've rejected. You pose hard questions. Why does this provoke me? What am I truly afraid to change? What within me am I avoiding? The answers aren't always comfortable, and they frequently require a bravery you didn't know you held. But with each revelation, you feel a subtle, undeniable sense of growth. You begin to comprehend that truth isn't just an idea. It is a current that reshapes your perspective, your feelings, and your choices. You also notice that living in harmony with truth transforms your decision-making. Choices that once felt tangled or unclear now carry a new simplicity. You rely on your intuition more because you've started to see the patterns in your own behavior and intentions. You begin to differentiate between what is easy and what is right, between what is comfortable and what is essential for your unfolding. You realize that discomfort is often a signal you are nearing a deeper revelation, that internal resistance is a signpost pointing directly toward transformation. The pull toward truth educates you in patience. It isn't about instant flawlessness or total certainty in every moment. It is about consistently choosing integrity, even in tiny, subtle ways. Admitting when you've erred, naming feelings you've suppressed, voicing what is real, not what is rehearsed. You notice this practice fosters an internal coherence, a harmony between your beliefs, your words, and your actions that you may have never known before. Through this deep commitment to authenticity, you begin to sense a quiet potency awakening within. It isn't boastful or loud. It doesn't seek applause. It is simply the steadiness that comes from living in accordance with your deepest truth. And if you felt even a few of these shifts, then you are already well on your way. The journey isn't about arriving at a destination. It is about recognizing you are already traveling the path. If this resonated with you, please give this video a like. It truly supports winds of thought. And let me know in the comments which of these 5 signs you've noticed most in yourself recently.